6:38. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:38, the meeting of the Charter Revision Commission for Tuesday, November 19th. We will do the roll call. We'll start with you, Jim, and work up with them. James Clark.
By the way, my volume's all the way up. I can hardly hear you guys.
Any better, Carl?
That is better.
It's not much better, though.
Testing, 1, 2.
John's here. Joe is here. I'm trying to figure out how to. I'm trying to figure out how to turn my phone.
There's two Dougs.
John. Gosh. Yeah. Joe and John. Ed and Carl are remote. Missing.
Tyler, the audio is really faint.
Audio is really faint.
Yeah, it's better for me now, but it's.
Carl, any better?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Maybe I'm losing my hearing, but I'm not so fine. But I'll make do somehow.
Okay. Okay. And I see Tanya's online as well. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes of our November 13th meeting? Any comments? Any suggested corrections to those minutes?
Yes, I do have. So if you look, it's the paragraph that starts with Mr. Clark. If you could strike the first sentence of that paragraph. Says,
I'm sorry. I'm going to jump off and jump back on again. I can't hear it.
Jim's really low. His volume.
It's so faint. I just can't hear anything.
All right, I got the mic close to me.
That's better.
Not much better, but okay.
So strike the sentence that says, Mr. Clark asked if public comments could be made verbatim instead of summarized. Also strike the sentence that says, Mr. Clark said he was concerned about written comments. Please replace that with Mr. Clark asked if the minutes of public comments could contain more detail than is typical of Norwalk's public minutes summaries, so as not to lose details relevant to the comment. And then I have now, as an aside, not because, for example, this kind of illustrates what I was talking about, because I never said the word verbatim because I don't believe we should have verbatim comments. So I just wanted more detail in the summary so we don't lose relevant information. And I think this illustrates exactly my point. So thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who's in charge of audio? Because this is a systemic problem. It's not just that you're not close to the microphone. There's something wrong with the audio.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking into it, Ed. Hang on.
Okay.
Hello, this is IT. There's something I can do about the audio. This is how the community room is set up. This is why we try to move meetings outside of this room, but this is the best we can do for now for audio. The only thing we can do is have the mics move closer to the speakers when they're speaking, but that's all I can do for the audio.
Okay, you sound great. So if we can get
you're fine
with a microphone like you, that'd be great. Is that doable?
I'm sorry?
You sound really good because you're speaking into a microphone. Is there any way to do?
It's just pushing the microphone.
I think you just take the mic and put it right in front of your mouth.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Great.
Right. Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah, it's treat it like a vocal mic.
All right, well, Ed, work on that, and the good news is that you should probably be able to hear the speakers well at the podium. It seems like.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anything else on the minutes? No. All in favor of approving the minutes
As amended?
As amended. Any opposed? Okay. So may I borrow your? Thank you. Which takes us to the public participation portion of the meeting. This is the purpose of our meeting this evening is to hear from our elected officials. All of you are perhaps more familiar than anyone in the city with working within the confines of the charter on a near daily basis. As a brief recap to what we've done to date, we had our initial organizational meeting. We had a meeting at the end of October to hear from members of the public to offer guidance as to things they might want to see revised in this iteration of charter process. And we had one other meeting in between, which leads us to this point. So we look forward to hearing from all of you, and we will then, kind of take the suggestions that we've heard from members of the public, from you all, and kind of guide our process moving forward when we meet twice in December and then after the new year. So I'm not sure what particular order we're meeting in this evening. I think the mayor needed to get out of here, so we'll get him going first. Thank you, Mayor Rowan.
Well, first of all, good evening. I want to thank you for taking on this really difficult challenge. You're going to spend lots of hours, but it's really important that we look at the charter and find out where it would be appropriately changed. I think your job will be a little bit easier this time because the charter is now in a very readable order, thanks to Steve Mednick, the previous Charter Revision Commission, and the council. So I think it'll be a little bit easier perhaps, but we'll see. But anyway, again, thank you for taking your time. I wanted to talk about 3 items. One would be a 4-year term for mayor. We considered and recommended, it was recommended and considered by the 2018 Charter Revision. The role of mayor is far more complicated than a lot of people think. And when the charter was first adopted, the longer term would recognize the fact that and provide a sufficient period of time for the mayor to familiarize himself or herself with the responsibilities of the position and provide voters with a sufficient track record on which to judge his or her success. The longer term would also enable the mayor to focus on long-term strategies. I know that in the last year of your term, which would be the 2nd year, it's difficult to start thinking about any new programs or projects that you'd like to move forward because you don't know if you're going to have enough time to implement them. You're also talking about hiring people that serve coterminous with the mayor. It's going to be difficult to hire somebody that says, well, your job is good until November unless the mayor gets reelected. So a 4-year term for mayor takes some of that away and makes it a little bit easier. And I just think it's something that should strongly be considered. It would also facilitate, as I said, the recruitment of senior staff. But one thing, it would not be effective for the next mayoral election. So 2015, the election, the mayor elected in 2015 will serve a 2-year term. It will take effect in 2017, 2 years after that. The mayor's elections are every odd year. So that's when it would take effect. Also in 2016, the commission also recommended a 4-year term for the town clerk. And we're talking about that also. The council, it's important that the council have that continuity as well. And in order to have effective elections, rather than having elections for this one and elections for that one every other year and then every 4 years, the council should take a look at the possibility of the council of a 4-year term. The Board of Education is already on a 4-year term cycle. So that doesn't matter. Maintain, I think it's really important, and I'll get into a couple of the reasons, to maintain the current structure of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Some of you have served on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I know Jim, you have. I know Mr. Camacho, you have. Greg Burnett has served on it. So they have a real working understanding of what the Board of Estimate and Taxation is and what it isn't. The current structure guarantees that no one party or geographic area can control the BET. No more than 2 members from any council district and no more than 3 appointed members from the same political party. So you've got a good mix. If there were people, if this was put in the hands of elected officials, they have they make decisions in different reasons. You know, I sit on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and we go line by line over every department's budget and sit there and interview them and ask them why they need this. Could they cut back? What else, you know, what do they need? What's more important? What's a want versus a need? And, you know, it's very time consuming and it's done thoroughly. And again, because we have no two members from the same district, and not more than 3 members of the same political party. And members are selected for their financial knowledge, and the process currently works. We try to, you know, I think any elected official worth his or her salt, whenever they're appointing somebody, they're always going to try to appoint somebody, a person with a particular talent that suits the position for which they're being appointed. So that's critical as well when you can take that into consideration. Sometimes when a person is elected, they get to the position simply because they were elected. So we'd like to also, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses, address technical cleanup items. For example, remove new requirement that ordinance establishing boards and commissions each be amended to include organizational language that can simply be addressed in a charter. Consider longer period between appointment of charter revision commissions. You know, we right now in the charter it's every 5 years. You're going to find out over the next month or 2 or 3 just how difficult that would be every 5 years. And quite frankly, if the Charter Revision Commission every 10 years does their job, there won't be a need every 5 years. Things don't change that much in 5 years that would warrant a significant change in the charter. The council can still appoint a Charter Revision Commission at any time, even if you do 10 years. If 5 years come up and you say, you know, we think there's some things that really need to be looked at, the council can appoint a Charter Revision Commission. They don't need to wait for the 10 years if that is going to be the next step. And finally, I've got my chief financial officer here. He and I and my chief of staff have been talking about certain things that he took a look at and made some recommendations. He certainly can explain them a lot better than I can. And I would ask if he can come up and ask your indulgence so he can come up and have a few words. Thank you very much. And again, I really appreciate you taking on this task. And we'll have to buy you some pizza afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rell.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, commission members. Nice to be here, and thanks for allowing me to get up and give a few comments and recommendations. These recommendations are related to the budget process. I classify them as conforming or clarifying for the most part. The first one may be a little bit more than that. As you probably know right now, the capital or the operating budget, it's a 5-year, I'm sorry, the capital budget's a 5-year budget. And what we're proposing to do is to go to a 10-year budget. And it would be similar in the sense the first 5 years would be the same as they are. So in the first 5 years of the budget, you see each project that's being proposed and you know which year it's falling in within those 5 years. What I'm proposing to do is for those second 5 years, years 6 through 10, that you would have another list of projects. They wouldn't be classified and wouldn't be set according to each year. You would just have a pool of projects that would fall within that range, that 6 to 10 year range. So it gives you a little more visibility longer term on what the capital budget looks like. But it's also difficult when you start going that far out to really start setting them in stone to say, okay, this one I know is going to be in year 8. It's difficult to do that. So it's, you know, I think it's best to just put them in a pool and in that range. There was a new hearing that was set up by the commission last year that we just had in September. And this was a public hearing because we wanted to get the public's input earlier in the process. And so we had that hearing in September. The membership of the hearing was set up. We thought there were two people who we think should have been on there, and we did end up bringing them into the hearing as panel members. It was the superintendent of schools and also the school CFO. They're not mentioned in the charter as being a part of that panel for that hearing, but we think it would be prudent and actually very important to have them there for that meeting. I know that the Common Council is concerned about getting more involved earlier in the process. There is what the charter says right now in terms of when the mayor produces his budget, presents his budget. It first goes to the members of the BET, and then it goes to the Common Council a week later. What we would propose is just to line those up. Just have it so that it goes to the Common Council at the same time as it goes to the BET. I'm not sure why that was put in place that way, but it seems like it would make sense just to have those two be on the same date.
I'm sorry, could you just speak a little bit closer to the microphone? I'm having a difficult time hearing.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Did you catch the last one? Did you hear?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about that, but maybe we can withhold questions until the end.
Okay. So this next one is a conforming change, conform to statute. When the BET goes to set the mill rate on the day the BET sets the mill rate, so this is kind of the very last step in the budget process. The BET is also they may set the frequency of when taxpayers pay the bills. So, you know, we pay real estate taxes twice a year. But there's a statute that says that they're required to do that. And so what I'm suggesting is that we strike that is a suggestion to the BET, and we would just be working off the statute at that point, which requires the BET to each year to set those dates or frequency of when people pay taxes. Typically, I don't think there's a lot of change. I don't think historically there's been a lot of change in that way, but.
Let me ask about that.
Sure.
So are you saying strike that all together or change it from a may to a shall? Like
I leave that up to the attorneys to determine whether or not it needs to be codified in our charter to be in conformance with the statute or just go off statute. Also going back to the capital budget, you know, the mayor's involvement in the charter is, you know, in my opinion, is very late. It's not mentioned in there until a review of the capital plan, which happens sometime, I believe, in March. And what I would suggest is that we kind of align the capital planning process to mirror the way the operating budget works. And so that the initial presentation of a capital plan would be in the same way that the operating budget is the mayor's operating budget, that it would be the mayor's capital plan. At that point, we will have had a chance to meet with the department heads and get their recommendations and go through them, vet them, and then ultimately for the mayor to make decisions about what gets into the proposed capital plan. Effectively, we kind of do that anyway. It's not that the mayor's not involved. He's very actively involved from the get-go. But it's just kind of, again, I think it would be more of a conforming with what we currently do, what our current practice is, and to set that out in the charter. And then finally would be just a clarification of the Planning and Zoning Commission's role in the capital plan, in the capital planning process. And if the changes get made, there would need to be some conforming changes in the ordinances as well. And that's it. I don't know if there's any questions.
Mr. Chair, do we have, can we ask questions now or later or?
Yeah, you can. I think that what we discussed last time, Ed, was that if you have questions now, please feel free to ask.
Okay, great. So with respect to presenting the operating budget to both the council and the BET at the same time, is the idea that we'd all be in the same room and it would be presented to all of us at the same
So,
time?
Ed, when I said present it, I think that's more the submission of it. So it may not be an actual presentation where we're in the same room, but the submission of the budget to the bodies.
Okay.
What happened in the same day.
And the same would be true for the capital budget? Is that?
Yes, right.
Okay.
That would be the intention.
I'm just trying to understand because I'm writing my notes, I'm thinking, but I'm not ready to ask questions yet because I want to do a little more research. And it's the, so.
Yeah, so I think.
We have the ability to ask for a call.
Yeah, Steve, I think we did that last time, right after we heard from the our elected appointed officials.
Well, you can do it tonight, but also keep in mind at our next meeting, based on the testimony tonight and the public hearing testimony, we're going to have this grid will be filled out and you're going to start laying out your priorities. And when we get to the budget issues, you would say to me, we need this information from the budget office, et cetera. I was actually going to ask him for some things, but we'll ask him as we get closer to the budget proceedings. That's when you'll get the real data.
Any other questions from the commission? Just one housekeeping. Would you mind stating your name?
Sure.
For the record.
Jared Schmidt, I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very
much. You're welcome.
If there's no other questions, we will, I guess, leave it to you guys to determine the priority for getting up to the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Good evening. I'm Darlene Young. I'm the Common Council President. We're grateful that you have volunteered to review the current city charter and consider how it might be revised to improve the effectiveness of our city government. We also want to note our continued gratitude to the members of the 2022-2023 Charter Revision Commission, who reorganized the charter into a clear, understandable, and usable document that will allow this commission to focus on further revisions as needed. We see two areas of work for this commission: continued cleanup of the existing document and tweaking our current government structure to increase the city's ability to meet the tasks required to continue to move the city forward. Given the enormity of the task of charter revision, there were certain issues in 2022-23 commission that the commission did not address. Among the outstanding issues are Part 2 of the charter, which consists primarily of powers assigned to the various taxing districts. It is our understanding that under state statute, the taxing districts have authority to revise their own charters. There is therefore work to be done to determine how best to address that section. Should the taxing district charter remain in the city charter if the proper way to amend them is through the taxing district votes, not city votes? Are there powers that are separate from each taxing district's charter that we need to keep? We also acknowledge that the redistricting process has raised questions about whether the taxing district boundaries need to be modernized, which would require action by the state legislature, but may also require amendment by the charter. We also ask that you revisit the sheriff and constable elected positions. It is our understanding that these positions continue to perform at least one necessary function for the city, but that it may be possible to consolidate the two positions or reduce the number of individuals elected given their limited function. In terms of modernizing our government structure, we hope that you all attended or had an opportunity to listen to the 3 forums we hosted this summer, which focused on the 3 major components of our charter: the role of the Common Council, the role of the mayor, and the budget process. In those forums, we saw certain patterns as to how other municipalities distribute authority, organize operations, and ensure effective and accountable government. Among those topics we request that you consider are finding opportunities within the city's operating and capital budget process where feasible and consistent where feasible and consistent with standard financial practices to enhance overall transparency, efficiency, and accountability to voters. The recent election pretends less financial support for Norwalk than received from the current administration. This environment will exert pressure on the city to create budgets and forecasts that will continue to provide the level of services and benefits to Norwalk and not overburden the taxpayer. The city's current financial budgets and plans have yielded a healthy rainy day fund and a AAA bonding rating envied by municipalities throughout the state, which must be maintained. Increased communication between the BOE, BET, and the council is desired and has improved over the past few years. The hope is that there can even be more coordination and communication as we move forward. It is difficult to legislate such communication efforts, but our view is that a sufficient amount of goodwill has been established in some areas where improved communication should be the best result. We recommend that there be more and earlier discussions as the budget develops, perhaps including codifying the new process this year of having council committees discuss budget priorities in the fall before department requests are submitted. Increasing the terms of common council and the mayor to 4 years. Our experience is that the complex challenges facing the city, including increasing affordability, upgrading our infrastructure and municipal buildings, and addressing increasingly extreme weather, require a longer time horizon for planning and implementation than 2 years, and that the city's effectiveness is diminished by the interruption of the uncertainty of distractions of an election year every 2 years. Cities and towns that have altered the term lengths of the mayor have historically cited greater flexibility in accommodating learning curves, more time for developing nuanced policy, the chance to attract stronger candidates and heighten immunity to political pressures as the pros of 4-year terms. 4-year terms also help to eliminate some of the focus that is otherwise directed towards re-election efforts, which would otherwise exist pretty much all the time, and enable representatives to concern themselves with what is good for the citizenry, generally, as opposed to what is good for re-election efforts. Much of the opposition to 4-year terms are really about the effort to keep a tighter rein on elected officials and the ability to get rid of, I don't want to say corrupt, but corrupt officials, which is understandable. Finally, identifying opportunities to increase the effectiveness of the Common Council, which might include increasing opportunities for the council to provide input on city projects and priorities, and moving Common Council compensation to a referendum process. Based on our experience, the council does not believe that increasing the number of council members or changing their distribution is likely to increase council's contributions to the city. What we heard from our forum speakers had much more to do with council's authority, including particularly their ability to possibly hire staff to help communicate with residents and facilitate policy research if necessary. So I want to thank you all again for your willingness to serve on this commission. And the Common Council is looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darlene. Were there any questions from the commission members?
No, I'm just asking, you'll be sending that to us? No. Yeah.
I think if you could email it to probably just to Steve would be the best way to do that. Okay, thank you very much again, Darlene. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Esther. Okay.
That makes more sense.
Good evening, Barbara Smith, Common Council. First, I would like to thank you all for saying yes. The job you have taken on is really important to the city of Norwalk, and we really appreciate you stepping up and taking this role. You have an excellent guide, Steve Mednick, who guided the first Charter Revision Commission, and I think I can speak for most of us that we trust Steve quite explicitly. So Council President Young spoke on behalf of the entire council. And of course, I agree with everything that she has put forth, and you will have that in writing soon enough. I also want to say that I support that the comments that our mayor made. I just have a couple of personal comments that I want to provide based on my own experiences on the Common Council and watching the forums and the different cities who came and spoke to us. First off, you know, I have listened to some of the comments that have already been provided to you, and I would just like to ask that you keep your focus on what is best for the future of our beloved city and its people, and to not allow personal and political agendas to cloud that goal. Regarding the forums, I think the biggest takeaway that I had was listening to the different cities and towns where, you know, they had different processes than we do. They might not have a board of estimate taxation, a finance board of any sort. And you had council members, you had elected officials who had control of the budget process. What I really found listening to those was that those cities and towns are financially unhealthy. When you have elected officials who are making decisions on the budget, sometimes what you're going to get is you know, it kind of refers back to what Ms. Young was saying about, you know, the focus on getting elected again, right? So I think what we have to think about is the health of the city and not allowing political ideas to cloud what is best financially for the city, meaning, you know, the BET plays a really, really important role in keeping our city financially healthy. One thing that I think as a council member who has, you know, been through this process a few times now, the council does get a little frustrated when we hear from our constituents what they need. Right. And so when we make amendments, for example, to the operating budget, it can be frustrating to, you know, have it go back to the BET and have that nixed. And so I think a way that we can maybe work towards the same goal is what has already been talked about, is better communication and earlier communication. And perhaps maybe there could be a meeting set during the budget process between the BET and the Common Council, or perhaps a specific night like tonight, right, where the Common Council comes and speaks specifically to the BET. I have certainly spoken in front of the BET on behalf of items that I think are important to my constituents. So I just like to see something around that. Also, going to the capital budget, I would like you to really focus on section 10-16 that states the Common Council may approve, reject, reduce, or reinstate any item in the proposed capital budget by a majority vote. This language has been the cause of confusion and misinterpretation of the authority and the powers of the Common Council. And so it was already referred to about, you know, the planning, since we've merged planning and zoning, the process needs to change a bit. And it needs to be clarified in the language. I think some of what I have seen is, you know, because in the past, the capital budget would, you know, go through the Planning Commission, then to the Planning Committee, now the Economic and Community Development Committee. Sometimes what you'll get is some political moving money around for pet projects. And I just don't think that that is needed or it's just not needed, and I don't think it serves the city well. So I would like you to look at that, examine it, look at what other cities are doing, and see what we can do to clean that up, to keep it less, to make it less political. And I think that's really about it. I think, you know, 4-year terms, you spoke very eloquently about, so did the mayor. I support that very much, but I just wanted to share some of those personal experiences that I've had. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Were there any questions, members of the commission? No, if not, is there anybody else who would like to address the council, the commission rather?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Greg Burnett, at-large member of the Common Council. I just have a couple of comments. I won't be repetitive in terms of what's already been said, and for the record, I support everything that's been said by the council president as well as Council Member Smith. But I did want to highlight a few things. First of all, I want to really, again, thank you for your efforts in your service to this, enormous task of looking at our charter. It's also important to do this because I think it gives the public an opportunity to question, say, what is the work that they're doing? And what is the charter? Do we have a charter? So this at least generates conversation in the public space about the charter, which governs how we do our business. So this is really important work. And it's also educational work for the residents of Norwalk. Two things that I'd just like to focus on. One, under Article 10, which is in the budget area, currently the Finance and Claims Committee, as it relates to the capital budget, has I won't say very little, but not much involvement in the capital budget. For whatever reason, it goes through the Economic Community Development Committee. So I would encourage you, support you to take a close look at the capital budget process and how the Finance and Claims Committee is involved in that process. It's my opinion, having served on the BET and chairing the Finance Committee of the Common Council, that the Finance Committee should have a greater role in the capital budget process, similar to the role that we currently have in the operating budget process. So there should be some alignment in that review.
Do you want us to look at a certain subsection of Section 10? Because Section 10 has...
Yeah, I just listed section. I didn't give a specific subsection, but as you review Article 10, which focuses on the budget process, if you can look at the involvement of council committees in the capital budget process. So there's several items that I know you'll be looking at, but again, personally, I like to just highlight one. I think high priority is the term limit work that you'll be doing to look at the extension of from 2 years to 4 years for the mayor and common council. I would view that as high priority. And two, I would view the budget process also as a high priority item to focus on. And I am supportive of the current role and responsibilities of the BET. Again, there's several members that are on the commission that have served and have hands-on experience in terms of the functionality of the BET. And I would strongly support that we continue down that way. We didn't grow our fund balance and maintain the AAA bond rating by accident. It came with strong financial stewardship, and I think we need to keep it in line so that we can continue to move forward. So I thank you for listening, and I yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Were there any questions from members of the commission? Okay, if not, is there anybody else in the audience this evening that would like to offer their thoughts? Yeah, absolutely.
This came up as a recommendation from my previous chief of staff, not the current one, but currently after the election, on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, then 2 Tuesdays later, the new mayor is sworn into office and takes charge immediately. Most places have a January 1st or something to allow the outgoing mayor to do the things he or she needs to do to finalize things, just get things in order. And also, it'll help the new mayor coming in, because I'm sure the outgoing mayor would be more than happy to have discussions and comments and answer questions that the new mayor might have. So I think the January 1st date, when a new mayor would take office, I think that probably is a little bit more effective, a little bit easier.
Thank you again, Mayor Rilling. I think we looked at that the last
We
time
did
around.
make that change in the last time because your
Yeah, I thought we
chief
did
of staff
too,
was
yeah.
very, yeah, your chief of staff was very articulate, persuasive. Okay. Your first chief of staff.
Well, thank you to everybody here who offered comment on the charter revision process. If there's nobody else here who has any comments, I did want to offer the opportunity to anybody online. I think we kind of I jumped that on the agenda because we wanted to hear from the folks who are here and then allow you guys to get going if need be. But if there are any members of the public who are on who would like to participate, we'd be happy to hear from you now. I don't see any other attendees other than Esther and Irene. So we also jumped over old business. So I think we've covered new business. It was the point of this evening's meeting was to hear from our officials. So is there any old business that members of the commission would like to discuss?
With this session, as the portion of the
agenda? We are finished with the new business portion, which was the discussion with the elected officials.
I would like to ask some questions of the people that spoke earlier.
Oh, okay. I thought we were doing that as we went along, but if there's
well,
folks still here who you'd like
that was
to.
explained after the mayor first spoke.
Okay.
But I do have some additional questions.
Sure.
And it's unfortunate that the mayor has started, but you know, he mentioned specific challenges associated with a 2-year term versus a 4-year term. And Tom, I don't know if you are able to speak to any of these, but I am wondering, in the experience of, let's say, the current mayor, have there been challenges hiring and retaining staff as a result of a 2-year term? I mean, is that something that has actually been manifest during the current administration, which I guess goes back about 10 or 11 years?
Sorry, we can't hear Tom.
You have to go to the mic.
Sorry, okay.
Would that include hiring a new chief of staff too in the middle of a term?
Yeah. As I'm saying, it's a difficult question to answer because you don't always know people's motivations. We do have a couple of open senior positions that we've been looking to fill and have not received as many applicants as we might have liked. We do have some good candidates, but I will say, as I said, I don't know people's motivations. I do know that if I were looking for a position and it was, you know, it was only for a short period of time, I would, and one's 2 positions, one's short, one's long, I'd go for the longer one, right? It's natural to want to have more security going forward. So I don't know if that answers your question, but as I said, it is difficult to know people's motivations, but just common sense will tell you that it's easier to recruit somebody for a longer position than a shorter one.
So again, I'm wondering, you're interviewing somebody to be hired during a 2-year term, and the feeling is that you can't make any promises beyond, you know,
well, you can't promise beyond 2.
Right. Well, exactly. But if there was a 4-year term, then you could promise that they would keep their job until the end of the. I mean,
it's as the mayor said, the positions are coterminous with his term or his or her term, right? So obviously, if you hire somebody, I mean, look, things happen, right? And you hope things go well. And if they go well, then the person would probably be around at the end of the term. If they don't go well, they don't. If it's a shorter term, obviously they could be replaced sooner.
I've worked in municipal government for the last 15 years, and my perspective is you most certainly would rather be someone where there's a 4-year mayor than a 2-year mayor if you are a person who's looking to get hired. The 2-year term leaves too much, you know, up in the air if things change.
It's just common sense, really.
Taking the job.
Then I could ask you, in your own personal experience, has there been a mayoral change that resulted in you needing to change your job?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And then the follow-up question would be, in terms of long-term planning, I know Mayor Rilling mentioned earlier that the 2-year term makes long-term strategic planning more challenging. And I'm wondering, during this administration, has that challenge been manifested? I mean, I don't see. I'd like to understand. Does that really happen? Do you find that you're not able to do long-term strategic planning because of the 2-year term rather than the 4-year term?
Well, I think in addition to long-term planning, I think Council President Young also summarized the various issues in the long term. It's in terms of long-term and short-term plan. Everything in government takes longer than the private sector, right? So something that might take a year in the private sector may take 2 years in the public. So, short to long-term, sometimes a little different meanings depending on where you are. But so just take Wall Street, all the work in Wall Street, for example. That's a long-term project that's going to take 5-6+ years to finish. I think you need to be able to look ahead. You need to think about things like the budget going forward. Like if it's going to cost, these projects are going to cost money, right? And I think it's important that you be able to plan long term, as Mr. Smith said, that you present a capital budget that goes out longer than, well, it's 5 years now, going out to 10. I mean, it's all part of the planning process. There's a longer horizon. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Again,
and if your question is, how do we plan? Of course we plan for a long term. Of course we do. But I mean, you don't always have.
So I'm challenged to understand how a 2-year term makes it so much more difficult to do exactly the type of planning than versus a 4-year term.
You said so much more difficult. I would say I wouldn't go so far to say it's not possible. I'd say it's better for the residents and for the mayor and for the administration if they can plan for a longer term than a short term. I think you can effectuate more things in a longer term.
Are there any examples that come to mind of recent projects that were not pursued because of the uncertainty associated with, a potential early termination of those projects?
Well, I'm hoping the mayor's around a long time. So
that's already been true.
Right. So I don't really know how to answer your question.
Okay. Again, I'm looking for an example that would support the argument that strategic planning, long-term strategic planning, is more difficult under a 2-year term versus a 4-year term.
Specific. Look, as I've said, I think the ability to plan for a longer time period just makes more sense. Can I find a particular instance? I can go back and look. But I think this common sense tells you that you want to have a longer time horizon. So you're not trying to fit a bunch of things in, or you're thinking about how to stage these things, for example. Say you have a whole bunch of capital projects that you want to do. You may want to stage them out over 4 years versus trying to fit a couple over 2 years. You have a longer time to effectuate your vision for the city as a mayor.
And I guess you can't do that. We can have an extended conversation about this, but I'm trying to think, the next mayor could, I have to assume that when a mayor takes over, there's already projects underway and they just continue?
There are, but I mean, maybe I'm not getting your question.
Again, I'm looking for an example.
As I said, I can go back
of a project that.
Can I just interject at this point? Harry's been around for a
2-year term versus a 4-year term.
Harry's been around for.
As I said, I'll go back
and I'm trying to find what are the problems that we are trying to solve by extending the term. And I recognize, different municipalities do different things, and some have 4-year terms and some have 2-year terms. Norwalk's had a 2-year term for a very, very long time.
Which was established when the charter was first written, right? And the city's evolved since then, right? $450+ million. It's a big budget, big process. It's not a simple little small town. There's a lot going on. It takes time to get up to speed.
And then
Mr. Chair,
question really,
any of the
other council members would be, in terms of the impact on just democracy, however you want to measure it, a 2-year term versus a 4-year term, do you feel that it would improve democracy or choices
That's for
available
you
to the
guys to
voters?
decide.
I'm sorry?
I'll let you guys decide that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Carl?
I just want to provide a little historical perspective here for a second. We vetted this question, and Steve, help me here, for some period of time in the last commission. One of the reasons that, and there were proponents on both sides to have lengthened terms, which I'll just give my perspective. I think a lengthened term is useful in that the wheels of democracy grind slowly, and I don't think you get much done in 2 years. So I think if you, in 4 years, you have a little more time. I mean, look at Congress. Every 2 years, they get elected 2 years. Every year they're running. Every other year they're running. So how much do they do for their real job? Not their fault, just the way it is. So we vetted this at some length. We did a great job with not only the commission members, but also with the council members. And we as a commission, I thought, did a great job, as we mentioned in the last meeting, of keeping politics out of this commission, which we did. But politics entered into the picture when it got down to the last 9 yards of the commission, because there was concern that if we made what we're talking about right now part of the commission to go to the public, it would not pass. The commission, the charter, the new charter arrangements and everything we talked about would not pass. And in fact, I'm not going to name names or anybody, but there were certain people that came to some of the commission members and basically said, and we talked about making it a referendum. I believe that's right. Is that not correct, Steve? As a ballot issue in the last election 2 years ago. And there was strong opposition.
The charter was a referendum. You were going to separate it out, yes.
Yes. And threat is a strong word, but let's just say a lot of pressure was applied that if we went ahead with this, it would be broken into a referendum, and everything else in the commission or everything else in the charter that had been put together was fine. But that for, again, political reasons outside of the commission, it was going to be squashed. And they didn't want to put that into a referendum or take jeopardy of not having the total changes in the charter not pass because of this term situation. And I think everybody is intelligent enough on this commission to figure out one of the reasons, or probably the biggest reason, that people did not want to go to 4-year terms. They wanted to see more rapid turnover or more turnover in elected offices. And you can draw your own conclusions there. If you want me to spell out to you in private, I'd be glad to do that. But that's why, John, I mean, we talked about this for a long time. And it had really valid reasons to extend the terms, but then it really wasn't probably prudent at the time to try and get the overall charter passed with a chance of having this come on board and fail, which would have caused the whole charter not to pass. And it was going to cost money if we had to do a referendum.
Thank you. I think the commissioner's done. I just want to say that we're not going to resolve this issue tonight. There will be, this is a major issue. We will probably put together a nice panel discussion so that you'll have a number of communities that have 4-year terms, 2-year terms, mixed terms, a wide variety of alternatives. And I think that is the better time to raise the questions, to really dig deep and figure out where you want to go. Because tonight was mainly to get some information from the administration, from members of the council. We're gonna have we'll have plenty of time to dig deep on this issue as we go through the process.
I would agree, and we did do what you mentioned, Steve, last commission. We had other people come in from other cities that had different terms.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get into that at a later date. And John, I want to get the rest of your questions in, but we have Councilmember Najelski Eichner is on. I want to give her an opportunity to offer her input on the process.
And I really want to apologize for being late and not being there in person, because as many of you know, I care passionately about this. But unfortunately, the $600 a year that the charter pays my council salary does not allow me to live. So I am at my job still. And I want to start by saying how much I support the recommendations that Council President Darlene Young made. And I am certainly happy to discuss any of those. But I wanted to speak specifically on a topic that I think is a little bit more of a position of mine and is not necessarily shared by others. And I do not represent the majority caucus or anyone else in sharing these comments. But I really wanted to talk particularly about our current allocation of budgetary responsibility. I think that Norwalk would be better served by having our elected council make the final line item appropriations for the operating and capital budgets, rather than having the unelected Board of Estimate and Taxation do so. And my reasons are twofold, both idealistic and pragmatic. Pragmatically, the job of the council really is to spend all year in meetings with the various departments about their programs and plans. We're the ones who receive residents' concerns and complaints. And we come to understand fairly well what's working and what the city needs to tackle next in each of our departmental areas. But what a department can do is driven really entirely by their budget. And by giving the council no real role in what is funded, the current system inefficiently leaves the council out of the real planning process for what are really most of the city's major decisions. Instead, the BET members, who I very much commend and commend enormously for their dedication and their thoughtfulness, but they cram a review of all of the city's proposals into a few weeks without having the opportunity for the full context that the council has developed over the previous year or more. And, you know, I can't say for sure that the outcomes are totally different than they would be if they were made by the council. But I personally can think of several areas where I would change the allocations if I had a role in that decision-making process. And the truth is that then 6 months or a year down the line, the fully bidded out project comes before the council, because we do have the requirement to approve every project before it is spent. And city staffers are often understandably frustrated when the council has questions or objections. And truthfully, almost nothing is ever voted down at that stage, because we're not going to waste the year of work that the staffers have done, even if the council would have done the project differently if we'd been involved from the beginning, or even if it's in fact not the project we would have done if we'd been choosing how to allocate the funds. And on the idealistic or sort of political theory side, I do believe that those who make decisions on the budget, which is what controls what the city actually does in a given year, I think those folks should be directly accountable to the voters. Now, some cities like Stamford achieve that through having an elected BET. But I have to admit that looking at their system, that seems to just basically lead to an enormous amount of duplication and confusion. And it doesn't really reach the efficiency point I'm trying to make about having the funds be allocated by the same people who oversee the work, hear the complaints, and know what the city needs. Now, I do know that some of my colleagues feel very strongly that the BET is very beneficial to our city because they see it as taking politics out of the budget process. And I do very much admit that Norwalk's budget process is less contentious than I think it is in some other cities, and that there have been real achievements driven by the BET, like the fact that we are fully funded on our pensions. On the other hand, I do think that it's important to acknowledge that every decision that the BET makes is a political decision that controls the city's future, whether we invest in pensions or schools, whether we fund more firefighters or have a lower increase in our taxes, whether we try something new or stay the course. Those are fundamental decisions that are political decisions, and those are decisions that define the city. And that will define the city, that will shape the city in terms of how it grows going forward. And I do believe that decisions like that, decisions about how we spend the money and how we then, what programs we do and what we invest in, I think that those should sometimes be contentious. And I do think that they should be made by a body that residents have direct control as voters over. And I also think, quite frankly, that this is an issue of public transparency because people understand what a common council is. They reasonably expect that the council has budgetary authority because it is the norm in the United States for the legislature to have the appropriations power. So our system right now confuses residents. I think it discourages residents. They expect that they can come to their elected representatives and demand that they be accountable for how the city spends its money. And they get frustrated when we tell them that we, in fact, don't have that power and they need to go talk to someone else. And that person is not elected and they don't have that authority as a voter over them. So again, I really want to acknowledge and express my gratitude to the many people who've been involved in the system over the years. This is not a criticism of the BET members. It's not a criticism of the mayor or the city staff. I think that we've really done very well with this system. At the same time, I think that there's a real opportunity for this commission to consider the pros and cons of our current system and whether we can find a way to retain the very specific accountant-oriented, CFO-oriented budgetary scrutiny that the BET has traditionally applied, while better utilizing the fact that the council has great operational knowledge of how the city works and what the city needs, and that by being elected officials making those decisions, we have direct accountability to the voters for those budgetary decisions. I could say a lot more about many things, but again, I'm happy to talk about this. I'm happy to answer questions, and I really am looking forward to this conversation as it plays out over the year.
Nora, thank you so much. Is there any member of the commission that has a question for Nora now?
I do.
Carl.
Just real quick, because I've always tried to figure this out myself. Currently, the way the BET is set up, is there equal representation across the entire city of appointed members that are on the BET?
Equal representation in what regard?
The BET members are either different parties, equal number of R's and D's, people that of backgrounds who understand financial situations and what it means to raise taxes or not raise taxes, uniformity in that thinking. Just, I guess qualifications, are they equal across the board?
Sure. So, and again, to be very clear, this is at the discretion of the mayor. The council does approve the mayor's appointments. And again, one thing I'll say about that, we as a council, and this is not a charter issue, this is a tradition issue, right? We've struggled with the idea of calling volunteers to account and putting them in front of a public hearing like a Senate confirmation and demanding to know their philosophy on the budget, right? That feels really intense to ask of a volunteer. On the other hand, because we don't do that traditionally, we don't really have a lot of information about their philosophy and how they're going to vote on the budget and what their priorities are. We can see their qualifications. The mayor certainly, and again, I want to be very clear. I think the mayor has picked excellent people. I think they're excellent and thoughtful. This is not a criticism of who's currently on it. But they are decided by the mayor. I believe that our mayor historically has looked for people with financial background. Again, that may be very different. And I think from operational background or knowledge of a particular area and programmatically what we should be investing in. But the mayor's appointments are subject to the minority representation requirement. So no more than a bare majority can be from one party. And I know that our mayor, Mayor Rilling, has historically tried very hard to get diversity of district representation. I don't know that we perfectly get there every time, but I know that he tries to find someone from, all 5 of the districts. That is not a charter requirement. That's just the mayor's practice as I understand it. So again, I think that though you hit one of the nails that I'm trying to raise, which is that what does it mean to have diversity of perspectives? And when you're choosing a budget, right? If you look at a Fortune 500 company, right? Their budget may certainly go through their CFO's office and the accountants will have a voice, but the budget is not set only by their finance people. The budget is set to a large degree by their operations people because they know what the company needs to accomplish in the going year, right? So I think that's part of the issue here is we've got great expertise, but is it the right expertise for setting a budget as opposed to tracking the budget, questioning the budget, pushing on the numbers, those are slightly different questions in my mind.
So just as a follow-up, so you believe that if it wasn't an appointed positions, but that they were elected positions, they would function better than being appointed, no matter who does the appointing?
I think that there is a good governance reason for that, right? I think voters have, the budget is the most important way that the city's decisions get decided. And I think voters should have a right to hold to account the people who make those decisions. So from a philosophical perspective, I do think that there should be voter control over final decision makers for the budget.
I will only say in closing that in my personal dealings and involvement in the city since I've been here for 20 years, is that if I talk to somebody about the BET, they don't know what I'm talking about.
Yep. And people come out, I mean, if you look at the budget process, say 2 years ago, this last year was pretty quiet, but 2 years ago, we had tons of people show up to the council to talk to us about budget line items. And we could say till we were blue in the face that we had no authority over that. It didn't resonate, didn't make sense. That's not the American system. So we'd say you have to go talk to the BET. And then you'd look at the BET meeting and like 2 people would show up because it just doesn't resonate. People don't understand. And that, to my mind, is not ideal. I don't think that's a preferable system.
Would it be helpful if, assuming that there was a BET still, or assuming the existence of a BET, would it be helpful to have a requirement that there be at least one member from each district, or that there be one member from each district, and that there can be no majority party on the BET? So if there are 5 members, 2 would be Democrats, 2 would be Republicans, and 1 would have to be an independent by definition. Would that be more representative?
Personally, none of those are the things that particularly concern me. Again, I have great respect for our current folks. I think they think a great deal about the needs of the whole city. I've not seen anything that makes me think that one district or another is favored. And I certainly, again, I think that they have partisan lines have not been noticeably, an effect of the decision making. I really think the major issue is that they often don't fully have the context of why a particular budget item is important. And they don't really understand sort of the long-term drivers that might mean that this is a priority. Whereas the council, by the nature of it, we know what needs there are in the city, and we would have a very different perspective, I think, on some of the budget decisions on that basis.
This last cycle, a budget cycle, as I recall, the Common Council voted by a vote of 8-7 to increase the proposed budget, which would have amounted to a very significant increase, a tax increase in the 6th taxing district, and a lesser taxing district in the 1st or 2nd. And so there would have been a disparity that was quite significant at that time. And the concern that I have, at least, is that the political process, although, what is urgent for District A and B and C might produce catastrophic tax consequences for the 6th taxing district, which is what would have occurred a couple of years ago. And then the budget went to the BET. We reduced the agreed upon or the voted upon cap, and then it goes back to the Common Council to vote on that. Actually, at that point, there would be nothing for the Common Council to do. If the BET had increased the budget, the proposed budget, then the Common Council would have had to take a vote by a two-thirds majority to actually approve the increase. So the concern is when political pressures are involved, because our taxing districts are not similar. Some provide fire, some provide sewer, some provide a garbage collection. That the Common Council is not what's important for District A, B, and C may very well result in a significant increase in taxes for the sixth taxing district or maybe the fifth or fourth. So that's the issue, and I think that the BET isn't or hasn't been as concerned about has been concerned about the overall tax impact for all of the districts in light of the fact that our districts are not similar in terms of the services that they provide.
But Ed, so I think a couple of things I'd say to that I think are really important to the point I'm trying to make here. That's a political decision, right? The BET decided that the needs of districts A and B were less important than the tax increases to the sixth taxing district. That's a political decision. Mm-hmm. Who is held accountable for that decision? If the voters of A and B don't think that was the right decision, what's their recourse, right? There are real consequences to that decision. And I would say that prioritize the needs potentially of our wealthier taxpayers over the needs of our less wealthy taxpayers. That's a decision. It's not one I happen to agree with.
But couldn't that be addressed by having a member from each of the districts be represented on the BET?
I mean, potentially. On the other hand, if that member is, say, from a finance background and is deeply concerned about whether we've made all of our pension payments and is less concerned about whether we have adequately funded our schools, again, that's a political decision. And that may be a political decision that people from a finance background are more likely to make, right? We can get into this question that I find very interesting, right? Why is our pension fully funded? Well, our pension is fully funded in part because in my sort of analysis of this, we historically underinvested in other areas. We've been incredibly lucky. We got the Senate Majority Leader. We're now getting 60% to fix all of our schools, but we could have been in a catastrophic situation had that not happened. So again, the decisions were made that reflected the values of the people and the experience of the people who are on the board, and that's totally valid. But to pretend that that's not political or that that wasn't a decision that had real consequences for how our city looks and how our finances are, I think that's disingenuous because they are real decisions and they have there's a real politics to it, whether it's political in the sense of people coming to talk to them. And I think it's concerning that people don't come to talk to them. Maybe they would have made a different decision if more residents from A and B had known that the people to talk to about the fact that A and B feel underfunded was the BET as opposed to the council. And I think the other thing I'll say there is that, again, there is a sense in which the complexities of our districts and our taxing systems and what everyone gets, that, again, is a political decision to keep that way. And it's possible that if the sixth taxing district had been asked to bear more of the burden for A and B, that would cause political concern from the sixth taxing district. And maybe we would have more concerns about the disparities in the way those different districts are taxed, right? All of this is valid political discussion, and there may be answers one way or the other. And we as a city might want to do it one way or the other. But I think that all should actually be the subject of public debate. And it is much less obviously so, I think, personally, when it happens at the BET as opposed to the council.
Just to be clear, and this is the last point, when I use A and B as an example, it wasn't that A and B were underfunded and the sixth taxing district was overfunded. It was that the funding level for the entire city, as approved by the BET, would have resulted in a significant tax increase for the sixth taxing district and not so much for the others or for some of the others. So it wasn't that any district was underfunded. It was that one district was going to bear, one taxing district was going to bear the brunt of it, or maybe two of them. So that was
right. And I didn't mean to misrepresent. I guess, my point is there's lots of ways you consider that, right? We have parents who think the schools are underfunded. We have senior citizens who think that they are overtaxed. Both of those are valid perspectives. And the question is, where is the appropriate place for the weighing of those two needs to happen? And I think the appropriate place for those two needs to be weighed is by an elected body, not by an unelected one. And certainly by one where people know who to talk to when they've got those concerns, because people should be advocating. The seniors, by all means, should advocate for, their taxes. The parents should advocate for their schools. We should let that play out, and have it weighed and see, what the voters think. And if we get it wrong, then the voters can hold us accountable.
Thank you so much, Nora. Were there any other questions from members of the commission for Nora? No? Okay. Nora, thank you again. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. And again, my real apologies for not being there. I look forward to watching all this and following up.
Thank you. Take care.
Since I had time, can I ask the question of, talking about the capital budget and the law, like, coming into the.
Yeah,
Who's speaking?
sorry. Carl, it's Doug. I'm gonna move the mic his way.
Oh, okay. Hey, Doug.
Sorry. I'm looking to just get some clarifications on a couple of the topics. Seemed like the capital budget process came up from different individuals that were here tonight. So I just want to get some clarity maybe of what they're seeking. The capital budget now has a 5-year plan, unless something's changed, 5-year plan, but you're actually voting, if I remember correctly, every year on the budget that you authorize the bonding for at some point. So you're really only voting technically on a 1-year budget, correct? Just for your background stuff. None.
Yes, that's correct. It's a 5-year capital plan, but really
What 26 years, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot, just FYI. I'm trying to get clarity.
I didn't take it that way.
Okay,
That's fine.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, it's not my intention.
Yeah, no, so what gets voted on is that
basically you're
that
voting on
year,
what
that
year-
subsequent year.
They go on a 1-year thing. Your department heads are all asked to put their input. If you have an infrastructure project, we're putting sewers in certain areas and it's a 5-year plan. Sometimes you put a little money in 1 year and the other, but you're not obligated the way the charter reads, the way that it does, that you have to fund year 2 the way it came voted on for the 5-year plan.
That's correct. But the thing to keep in mind is that it's useful to have that plan. And the rating agencies look at those plans. And so so it is, it's important to have that from, just from a planning standpoint and know what's coming down the pike and to, and like I said, for the rating agencies do look at that.
Right. No, I'm great, but I'm just clarifying, it's not binding. You have a 5-year plan. I'm
right.
asking that question because you're bringing up to try and put in a charter a 10-year plan. And I'm like, well, you could do a 10-year plan if you wanted to. It's just not binding. I'm just trying.
That's true.
I'm trying to ask the question why you want this in the chart versus just a matter of practice.
Because what gets reflected, one of the reasons that I think it would be good for us to go to a 10-year plan is because when you have a 5-year plan, there's an incentive for departments to put what they have into it, to put maybe a lot more into it than there should be. I know right now, if we were to look at that 5-year plan, it doesn't align with what our capacity is, either financially or operationally, to be able to carry that out. So, I'm presenting this and offering it as something that would line up better, something that the rating agencies could look at and see that it's a more reasonable and probably a more practical plan that you could follow.
So again, for clarity, you're looking for something in the charter that requires financial department to submit a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. But there's no way they had to. Steve would have to correct me on this, but you can't bind another council to actions from the previous council unless a contract is signed. So a plan is a plan, but you're just, that's why I'm asking for clarity, just looking for something in charter that actually kind of requires you to submit.
Right. So if your question is whether or not I'm looking for whoever it is to adopt that plan, to actually vote on the 5-year plan, the answer is no. And so, yeah.
All right. That's what, I'm sorry, I had a couple on the top. The clarification language, I understand that because we've gone back and forth with different attorneys about the interpretation of what the council can do with the capital money. Can it add more capital money in? Or once the DET sets a cap, that's what we've been operating for. You can move the money around within that budget any way the council wants to at the last look. So my question is, did they ask about that? Having the council not had the last look? Or just simply getting clarifications? The language is pretty clear. The council cannot expend more funds than awarded by the DET capital budget. I just want to understand.
You want to answer that?
I think that came.
I think that's more
I
of a.
think Barbara's the one who brought that up, though, something about line, but if you can answer that.
Yeah, one thing I would say, just to kind of give context to that, is that I think if you read the language the way it's written, is that the Common Council, I believe, has more authority in that last step to do more with the capital budget than it does with the operating budget.
Right.
And so they kind of counteract each other, or they're opposite. The process for the operating budget and the process for the capital budget, where in the operating budget, the limit in the operating budget, the limit is set by the Common Council, and the BET has more say over specific line items. It's kind of at least the way I read it, it's the reverse when it comes to the capital budget.
Right. That's why I didn't know if that's what they wanted to eliminate.
I believe Councilmember Smith was alluding to having the commission look at the wording as it relates to the capital budget. When it gets to that particular phase in the budget, you were correct. The council cannot increase that beyond the cap amount in the capital budget set by the BET. However, there is language that allows the council to move dollars around. And the example that was given last budget cycle, at the last minute, there was, I'll use the word lobbying, to move dollars around from one department to another. The process did not go well. So I think we're looking for clearer, more specific language in terms of how that step would be implemented as it relates to after the BET sets the cap on the capital budget. What process would the council use if they, for whatever reason, chose to move dollars from one line item to another?
Does time help? Because I know it's usually a squeeze.
Yes, the time would allow discussion to take place with department heads that have submitted their capital budgets, to have dialogue with those departments to determine, is it feasible for one department to say, okay, we can maybe push out a project and not need as many dollars, so therefore another department could use those dollars if necessary. So time would allow for more dialogue, more discussion. So it would not be a last minute discussion or last minute quote unquote lobbying for movement of dollars.
I wasn't sure. It was discussed about the mayor getting involved with the process at a different timing.
Excuse me, Doug, could you put the microphone closer to your,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your mouth? Sorry.
I didn't write down the exact language, but I thought it was brought up that mayor wanted to be involved in an earlier process of the capital budget versus basically it goes through everybody else, then goes through the mayor to make his adjustments. Even asking for more money than was allocated before, and going back to the if I remember correctly, I'm just trying to understand what's not working as we look at it, because BET, the mayor's a member and points. So I'm just trying to figure out what exactly you want.
As I mentioned, when I started my comments, I thought it was more, it may be more of a, maybe more language in the charter to conform or to, to codify what really the practice is now.
The mayor is involved early on, you know, and as the CEO for the city, you know, it should be his prerogative to establish or at least propose what the priorities should be, what the capital priorities should be for the city. And you know, to an extent, he does that. But if you, as you're going through and reading the process that's laid out in the charter for the capital planning process, there's not a role for him until a review that happens on or before March 5th. And so what I'm saying is to let's have the charter reflect what actually happens in the process where the mayor gets involved much earlier than that.
So it's not being viewed as the mayor has second to last look to make adjustments prior to the council. I'm just asking, don't misunderstand how I phrase things, because it's just me. But I'm assuming department heads that are putting their capital budgets are having discussion with the mayor. The hope is communication all the way through the process.
Right.
It's always been my experience, and I'm sure the present mayor also. So I understand how it works. I just want to make sure we're not something that's already kind of happening anyhow. It's just and the mayor gets, again, like I said, the last look before it hands off to the legislative body to approve or change what it wants to change.
So
I'm trying to figure out what step you might be envisioning.
And I think it would be more early on in the process to mirror or run in parallel with the operating budget. As you mentioned, there are conversations that happen with the department heads between him, me, the mayor. You know, those conversations would happen with the operating budget. The mayor presents his operating budget as his proposed budget. And I guess what I'm saying is we should probably do the same thing with the capital budget.
Okay. I think I've got enough to kind of figure out. The only other item that was up concerning capital budget was the finance committees. I think I've got it.
I wasn't going to ask the question, but since we went down the rabbit hole tonight, Jared, if you could start thinking about it, I don't think the commission needs it tomorrow. One of the things that we'll look for, you've talked about trying to do an alignment. If you could actually sit down, put pen to paper and kind of look at the alignment and see how the alignment would work and how it is currently established in the charter. If you could do that, that might be enormously helpful to the commission when we get to this process.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
So you have a lot of time to do it. I just wanted to raise it since these questions came up tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
We add to that because I'd like to get the council's take, having sat in that seat. Department heads and council people don't necessarily need to agree on, you know. So ask Ms. Smith. So I want some input. I want some input from the council side of this too.
Well, they'll be there. I mean, it just,
No, I don't mean
yeah,
that.
this is just a,
Right.
the chart. And then
Right.
when you meet on the subject, everybody
Okay.
will have an opportunity to debate.
Right.
And may I point out for the record, if we don't do what the council wants, it's not going to pass. So it's important that we make sure the council is consulted at all times.
Were there any questions from commission members? Right now? Your line of question, maybe started up with other questions that you wanted to ask.
I'll quote my mother. I don't remember.
Okay.
But you know, given the opportunity, there's always a question. I was asking, going back to the 4-year terms, and I am wondering, in the case of the extending the term for council, elected council members from 2 years to 4 years, what problem does that solve, or what problem is that seeking to address? And alas, Greg, I apologize. You're the only council member left in the room. The others have departed. And you know, maybe this was discussed earlier and somehow I missed it. But nonetheless, that would be my only remaining outstanding question.
I would say it's not really addressing a problem. I wouldn't use the word problem. I think it allows for a more efficient way of governing the city. My personal experience serving on the Board of Education for 4 years, the first year allowed me the opportunity to learn and absorb information before starting to make recommendations and suggestions in terms of changes. That 4-year term allows you the opportunity to really embrace the work that's being done before you start getting into the detailed work and actually setting long-term strategy, because you've had that experience in that time serving on that particular board, in this case, the Board of Education. On the council, realistically, the moment you get elected, you're starting to think about whether you're going to run again in 2 years. That first year, there's so many items that come before you that you have to absorb, and before you know it, the 2-year term is up. So the 4-year term, again, allows the opportunity, and in speaking with neighboring towns, not only here in Connecticut, but even in other cities outside of the state of Connecticut, the 4-year term allows much more opportunity to embrace various projects, understand how they're functioning, and begin to set long-term strategy, and actually, in some cases, see those plans move from origination to actually execution and actually being implemented and finalized. So the 4-year term allows that cycle to occur versus a 2-year term. You might implement something or bring something forward, but the 2-year term does not allow you to actually see it move towards execution and actually completion. So again, I don't want to use the word problem, but it allows for a more efficient way of governing in the council role.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. And one of the things that we discussed, because this came up last time too, was if we were going to do a 4-year, so recommend a 4-year term for the mayor, would it make sense to align it with a 4-year term for the council? And again, to avoid the word problem, I think one of the challenges that we heard from people who served on the council or were serving on the council at the time as a 2-year term was, it takes a couple of months, if not a year, to kind of figure out where the rooms are and when the meetings are and what your role is. And if you're running for re-election, you're essentially starting that process before you've even really gotten anything done. I think one of the challenges it creates, and this is something that I was going to bring up because it's an issue that came up recently in our district, was we had 2 council people resign midterm, at the same time. And so kind of creates 2 separate issues. One that I would like to see us address is how we fill vacancies on the council. But then the other is, what does a 2-year versus a 4-year term do for people's willingness to do it? I think it's a lot easier to walk away when you have a year or so left than 3 years or 3.5 years. And if we do that, we also would have to look at how we fill those vacancies, because right now it's not spelled out probably as it should be. And I think we could all probably come to consensus that the way it's in there now is not adequate. So we can, I'm sure, hear from more people. We have a council person here. Rick was a former council person, and then you can get their perspective and kind of dig into that deeper, because it's going to be an important one to go over.
I'd just also add to that, Tyler, that I think for people that think about wanting to run for council, there's a big difference in you wanting to run for council and commit to 2 years than to commit to 4. So I think if you make a commitment to 4, not that everybody's not on council right now, it's not terrific and great, but I think you raise the bar a little bit of those who really want to be into a council position in politics and realize how much work it takes to do that. If you're going to commit to a 4-year term, then you're probably pretty dedicated.
Any other questions in the, or questions or topics you'd like to discuss in the old business? We're kind of jumping back to old business. This will be our last, thing to discuss before we adjourn. So, Doug?
I did bring up an item on my list. About the redevelopment agency.
Doug, we need you to eat that microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I brought up at our last meeting that redevelopment does not appear anywhere in the charter. And we talked about trying to see if it should be put in and where it will be put in. I'm thinking either.
You still can't hear you.
That's what it is, but so I'd like to get it on this list.
So noted. It will be on the list.
Thank you. I didn't catch it the other day. I didn't catch it when I said everything was good.
Well, no, this did not include the notes from the last meeting. That's why it wasn't there. This was just the public hearing. I was just going to explain that to everybody. The first run at the chart, at the grid or whatever, the tracking chart was only the public hearing. I just wanted to give you an idea of how it sets up. So that's why the redevelopment agency wasn't in there. I did not ignore the vice chair of this commission. I want to point out for the record.
We'll have a host of new things to add to it. This is enormous scale.
Well, I think it'll be helpful as we try to prioritize. Yeah.
I like the.
Thank you. That's all I have to say tonight.
Any other old business? So I think just as a kind of housekeeping thing for the commission, I think what we will do, kind of will lay out at our December meetings is we'll start to figure out exactly how we want to tackle these things. So what we did the last go round was we would identify a particular, I think we almost went chapter by chapter. There's a lot more work to do that time around. This time, perhaps it's issue by issue when we'll go from the front to the back, but we'll spend our meetings kind of digging into a particular topic or a particular section or chapter, and what we did last time was went through line by line. And, we took everyone's thoughts into account.
As you start prioritizing, what I'll do is the only pushback you'll get from me is I'll say, I could use another month getting a panel together on that issue. Can we deal with this one first? So it may go sequentially. It may go on the basis of the availability of speakers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it all right to ask for information based on the fact when I feel like the individual came down and that was pretty much on our list? That's the priority that was looked at. So
I have no idea what you just said.
Information. Gathering it on the subject.
You should. Yeah, I think you should start accumulating in your own a list. And I think once we start laying out the priorities, the time to ask for the information would be as we're going through it sequentially, so that we're not inundating them with a lot of information and it doesn't connect to what we're doing on our agenda. So I would look at what you learned. I would look at this grid when you get the grid and start developing your list. Get the information to me or run it through the chair, and we can get the information out. But like, for example, I was going to hold off on asking Jared for that list, but I figured since we went into it deeply already tonight, it'd be good for him to start thinking about that. So that doesn't hurt. If you have those kinds of concepts, raise them. And if the chair thinks it makes sense, we'll advance it. But for the most part, let's just try to stick with the issues as we're going through the issues.
Thank you.
I don't know if it fits in the category of new business or old business, but Tyler, I know you and I have discussed separately the website for the commission. I think the website should be modified to notify viewers, residents that their input is invited. And I know that for the last go around, I wish I'd taken a screenshot. Of course I didn't. But there was a portal that specifically said, give us your comments. So I think that's an improvement. Also, I shared with you a one-page description of charter revision and what the charter is that had been, I think, posted or available from the previous charter revision. It's on it's a city website, but there's no link to it and from the current page. I think that would be really helpful.
Was that the FAQ we did last time?
I'm sorry?
Was that the FAQ, Tyler?
Yes, yes, it was.
Yeah, it was the FAQ.
We'll,
Why don't we do that again? Yeah.
Yeah, we absolutely should. And
Right.
those were all great suggestions. I will look at that this week and check in with Esther. And Esther was very helpful and responsive to our other suggestions for the page. I think you're absolutely right about we have the link for email us, but that should be like a bigger thing, right? Inviting people in.
Only if you want input from the public. If you don't, leave it as it is.
No, and I think there were some kind of like not dead links, but redirected to some old stuff. And I think we might want to redirect to some old stuff is FAQs and like a quick what is the charter kind of page. But I'll look at that this week and check with Esther. She was able to update it very quickly last time based on our suggestions.
And also I apologize. I was a math major in college, but the page says there's 7 members on the commission, but there are now 9.
There are 9. That was the last time there were 7.
There were 7. That is correct.
So we will update that as well.
Thank you.
All right. So barring anything else, we're okay. A motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Carl, all right.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Oh, that's true.
Bye, everybody. Have a good Thanksgiving.
All right, goodbye.
Keep taking that.